guys, how are we all doing? I hope we are well. I am very well, thank you for asking. Thank you to all my subscribers, old, new and in between. Thank you very much. I all appreciate you very much. And to those who haven't subscribed, yeah, come on. What are you worried about? Poor quality content. Bit harsh. I mean, fair, but a bit harsh. Anyway, to quell the chaos that is in my mind right now, I feel I need a new project. Tell me you're creative without telling me you're creative. I know I've got loads of other projects on the go. I know. I haven't finished any of them. I've got so many ideas that I want to get started and I just can't control it. So every so often I'm just going to let that beast feed, and the beast has fed and told me I need to play around with natural dyes. You need to make a dress that is from fabric that you have dyed from a naturally sourced extract. Where my beast goes, I must follow. Now I'm going to have to probably do this in a few different videos because there's quite a lot to pack in and I don't necessarily want these videos to be too long. And you can pick and choose what you want to kind of watch. So this is the practicalities, considerations and prep part. Yes, I know it's the boring part, but it is quite important. If I can put this out here to other people, I know I've done something. So what? Why? How? Huh? I just was happening watching a particular content creator I've been following for quite some time, Sarah Homfrey, and she was doing some what they call solar dye pots, which is putting small bits of fabric and yarns and wools and ribbons in a pot with different colours with a bit of water. It's left in the sun for about 3 months and job's a good one. Now don't ask me how I managed to equate that to dyeing large amounts of fabric to make a dress. I don't know. That really is how my mind works. I don't know. I don't even know me. But I needed to get I was after buying a couple of books and doing some online research, there were some things I just couldn't escape. If I wanted to have a decent dye job where the dye lasted as long as it could, I needed to follow some steps. Could I find some of these steps with equating to large fabric? No, I couldn't. So I have got here 2.5 meters by about, I don't know, 140 centimeter wide, pure linen fabric. I bought it from the New Craft House, the Dead Stockist. So this particular type of fabric is not available, but a good 100% linen is what I've got, and that's kind of what you want to look for. And I've got 2.5 meters of the stuff. Now everything that I've been looking at when it comes to dyeing mentions dye pots, the stock pots that you use solely for dyeing. You don't use it for cooking as well. And I looked up how big my stock pot would have to be able to dye this amount of fabric with any sort of success, and it had to be a minimum of 30 litres. Now, if I worked in a professional kitchen, that will probably be not a problem. My kitchen is small, and to be honest, it sounds unsafe for me. I'm not prepared to have a 30-litre pot full of very heavy, wet fabric, plus some loads of delicious lace. On my oven, on my stove. I'm just not. I'm not. I don't even want to contemplate how heavy that would be once it's all cooled down and I had to get rid of all the water. No, I could have gone and dyed it in the bath. I have seen people do that before. I just know my luck. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to stain it. Natural dyes do stain, and somehow they can get into the little cracks and bores of things, and it just wasn't worth the argument. I don't live in rented accommodation. I have a mortgage, but no, it wasn't worth the argument. And if you do live in rented accommodation, think really carefully about dyeing in the bath. Is that likely to lose your deposit? Just think. So I thought, well, how the hell am I going to do this? You know, what what considerations do I have to put in to do this? Because basically, if I can't do how they say you should do it safely, I'm going to have to kind of improvise. But then I think those improvisations will have a bit of an effect on the outcome. So if I was to be able to do it in a pot on the heat, do how they said it at the right temperature for blah, 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 I would get a quite strong colour, and I think it would work really nicely. I don't have that. So what I do have is a large plastic box. Quite narrow, quite thin. This will hopefully allow my fabric to just sit a little bit. It's kind of, it's akin to low immersion dyeing, and it will hopefully sit in there, and it will have a bit of chance to spread out a little bit, because you want an even coverage as possible. But even I know, and this is the biggest concession I've had to make, I know that there might be some different variations of colour on the fabric depending on how I move it around and how it sits in the water, and I have to be okay with that. I really have to be okay with that. So that's a concession that I've got. But with this is a 32-litre box, I think I should be able to get a decent enough coverage. It should at least be able to spread out a little bit. And I've got oven gloves. No, I've got washing up gloves, so I'll be able to manipulate the fabric and move it around. I've also got this lovely lace. Some of it is vintage. And I think I will dye it in a different box, so it's got its own space to kind of move around. Now I could put this in the pot. There's not enough there that I don't think I could put it in a pot. But the thing is, with lace, you do have to be careful about the heat, and it could completely seize up, and it could really ruin it. So I'm just going to go with the same method. So at least it will fade in a similar way if it's going to fade, or it will blotch in a similar way if it's going to blotch. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm dyeing. So what do I need to do to get the fabric ready? Again, I did a lot of research. I've got a couple of books, and I did a lot of online researching, and there are things you just can't avoid. And this was where it takes the time. It can be quite a time-intensive process. It can be reasonably cheap, but it's quite time-intensive. So I knew again that certain aspects needed to be on a pot, in a pot, on the stove, on the temperature, keep it there, blah, 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 blah. I can't do that. So I had to decide what I was going to do, and I decided to get a slightly much smaller box, and I was going to use a box to let things just sit. So what did I need to do first off? Actually, I pre-washed it. Let's start the process nice and easy. Stick it in the washing machine and pre-wash it as I normally do, which is on the lowest heat, but with a delicate liquid. But it just takes away some of the stuff that's already on it, and it starts to pre-shrinking. Then I had to scour. Now, what is scouring? Well, basically that's washing with something that will just help to really strip away the grease. Now, with linen and cotton, that can easily be done by soda crystals. With stuff like wool and silks, you need to be much more delicate, and I might talk about that in a different video, but not for this one. So what I did was I've got some cotton as well. I put my cotton, my lace, my linen in the box, filled it up with about 8 litres of very hot tap water, and I mixed in 500 grams of soda crystals, mixed it all in, and I just basically started massaging around like a very gentle washing machine. Now, I think that there are probably liquid soda crystal products out there which you probably could put in the washing machine. I don't know why I didn't think to do that, to be honest. But you could do that, so you get a really good scouring, because basically you just want it in as hot as possible water to really beat out that grease. And that's especially with older fabrics. So if you've got something from the second-hand shop or thrift shop, you really don't want to do this. You want to get as much grease out as possible, because it will adhere in a very different way. And it won't look good, it won't look intentional, it'll just look like you've dropped your dinner down your front. So I had to do that. But I decided that I knew that I wasn't going to get the temperature hot enough for long enough, and it wasn't going to be agitated enough. So what I did was then once I took it out of the soda crystal bath, which I left for about 15 hours, I let it go completely cold. And that was as good as it was going to get. I then decided to put it all back in the washing machine, which I probably should have done in the first place, and washed it at a 60-degree wash with bio liquid. And that was in my head, that's the final attempt to get any grease out. No fabric conditioner or anything like that, but it was quite a harsh wash. But I hope by that point, any residual grime, grease, whatever would be gone as best as possible. But I have to kind of concede to myself, this is the concession part, I might not have done. There might still be little lingering bits. So when the dye goes on, I might still have to do some creative cutting to try and avoid any really obvious bits. It might be fine. I don't know. But then comes the final part. Yes, there are quite a few parts. Pre-washing, scouring, and that could take in 2 parts, is the mordanting or the binding. So basically what that does is it helps the dye stuff to stick to the fabric cleanly, properly, securely. You don't, if you don't do that, it's going to wash out, it's going to look really quite faded, and that's probably not what you want to do. Not when you put so much effort into it, you want it to stick. Now, you could use soy milk, and I'll talk about that in a different video, but what I did here was I used aluminium acetate, which is really hard to get a hold of in this country. It just doesn't seem to exist in most places, so I managed to find some, and it was just about enough for the weight of fabric. So all this here weighed close to 500 grams. That was about 25 grams of aluminium, or aluminum for your Americans out there, aluminium acetate, and I think it's worked. I mean, it feels very different. It feels like there's something on there. Now, obviously I'll need to rewash it again before I put it in the dye pot, but I've done as best as I can. Now, again, here comes a concession. I might not have got the mordant all the way through. It might have patched in places. It might not have done. I don't know. But I really couldn't do anything more than that. And I think that's the biggest problem. Well, not the biggest, it's the biggest thing when it comes to dyeing large batches of fabric. You can only do so much. So be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, have some expectations set. Don't expect it to be bold and brilliant colours and solid all the way through. Enjoy the process, have fun with the experiment, but just also know it might not come out quite according to plan. But then again, we're all creatives. Does anything ever come out according to plan? So to recap, I pre-washed it, I scoured it, and in this instance I mordant it. Now, do you need to mordant? Not necessarily. If you happen to dye with stuff like clutch, gallnut, tea, anything that's heavily tannined, that tannin acts as the binder. So you could do it, if you wanted to dye with those sorts of colours, they're more earthy tones, you could do that, and you don't have to do the mordanting process. Cuts down a bit on cost and a bit on time. You could use iron water or iron sulfate granules. Basically, iron water is probably a lot easier. Basically, nails, vinegary solution, water, leaving some, let it get rusty, and use that water as the mordanting. Now, what this will do, this will change the colour of your fabric. It will give it a slightly orangey tone, and it will, this is what they call it saddening. It saddens the colour, so rather than a bright yellow, it will be more like an olive green. Now, if that's what you like, go for it. Again, it means you don't necessarily have to mordant your fabric. But if you're looking for a slightly brighter colour, slightly fresher colours, you are going to have to find a different mordant. So for cellulose like linen and cotton, aluminium or aluminum acetate works really well. You could also use aluminium, is it lactate? Oh, I'll correct myself if it's wrong. But I found it really difficult to get hold of in this country. I don't know why. Now, it's quite a lot to take in. It's quite boring. But it's important to understand that in order to dye over 2.5 meters worth of fabric, you are going to have to make a few concessions, and you're going to have to prep in a very different way. But come back to me in the next video, which I'll be filming very soon, and we'll do a bit of fun. We'll talk about what I'm going to do, and some of the colours I may or may not have created. Yeah. But hopefully that's been interesting and it's kind of informative. I will link I'll put some more instructions and that down below, because I know I talk really fast. That ain't gonna change, sorry. But that's kind of phase 1, is the prepping and concessions, and just being aware of what your results might end up being. But once you've got that done, you've got a lot of fun to come, and it's gonna be, yeah. So This has been a Crazy Cat Lady production. You have been watching an unoriginal idea. Until next time, guys, take care. Bye-bye.